Alex Cole stepped out of the hospital elevator. He straightened his blue suit, adjusted his tie, and checked his watch. Everything was on schedule. His foundation was at the hospital to make a donation, a multimillionaire grant to support the treatment of critically ill patients. The cameras were waiting downstairs. Smiles, speeches, headlines. That was the plan. But in the next 3 seconds, everything changed. Just outside room 209, 3 little boys were sitting on the floor. They were crying. All 3 wore blue denim overalls with white shirts underneath. Their small hands gripped toy cars. Their cheeks were streaked with tears. Alex froze mid-step. The resemblance hit him like a punch to the chest. They had black wavy hair just like his. Their eyes, an intense, unmistakable shade of blue, were identical to his own. And then he saw it. A black birthmark on each of their left cheeks. Crescent-shaped. The same spot. The same shape. The same mark he'd carried all his life. He walked toward them slowly, crouching down until he was at eye level. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. The boy closest to him sniffled and wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Mommy's sick. The doctor said he won't make it," he said. "They said we can't go inside," the second boy added, looking down at the floor. The third boy didn't speak. He just clutched his toy car tighter and stared up at Alex with wide, tear-filled eyes. Alex turned to the door behind them. The name on the plate read Sarah M. Douglas. The name meant nothing to him. But the boys? They looked like a mirror he wasn't prepared to face. "What are your names?" he asked softly. "I'm Lucas," said the first boy. "I'm Levi," the second one whispered. "I'm Liam," said the third. Alex's mind spun. His chest tightened. These weren't just children in need. They looked exactly like him. Same features. Same eyes. Same mark. He had walked into the hospital to give away money. But now he had stumbled into something much deeper. Something that had his face. And possibly his blood. As Alex knelt beside the boys, questions stormed through his mind. Who was Sarah M. Douglas? Where was the boy's father? Why did they look so much like him? He glanced down again. Lucas was rubbing his eyes. Levi kept fidgeting with his toy car. Liam just stared, silently pleading. Alex opened his mouth to ask another question when a voice echoed from down the hallway. "There you are, Mr. Cole. We're ready for you now, sir." It was Marcia, his head of PR, followed by a small camera crew and hospital staff. They were waiting to take him to the atrium, where a podium had been set up beneath a massive banner. The Cole Initiative, restoring hope to the sick and vulnerable. Alex straightened slowly, his mind still spinning. He looked back at the boys. "I'll be right back, okay?" he said softly. "Don't go anywhere." The boys nodded, confused but trusting. He turned and walked briskly down the hallway, fixing his suit jacket. But his thoughts were still behind him, back with the 3 little boys who looked like his reflection split into thirds. As he stepped into the hospital atrium, the sound of camera shutters snapped through the air. Reporters leaned forward. Nurses clapped politely. Hospital executives stood smiling, ready for the photo op. Alex forced a smile. But something had shifted. He wasn't really there anymore. Part of him was still at that door. Still kneeling on the floor. Still staring into 3 identical faces. Faces that felt impossible to walk away from. Alex stood at the podium, facing the sea of reporters and hospital staff. His hands were steady, his smile poised, and his words carefully crafted. The cameras flashed, capturing every second of the moment. The Cole Initiative was officially here to help, to make a difference, to change lives. The speeches went on smoothly as planned. It was all routine. But something was wrong. As he spoke about the Foundation's future initiatives, his mind wandered. He couldn't stop thinking about the boys, their faces, their eyes, the way they had looked at him with such trust. The way they had reminded him of a time he'd tried to bury. His thoughts were interrupted by Marcia's voice in his earpiece. "We're done here, Mr. Cole. Time to wrap it up." Alex gave a final nod to the cameras, flashing a practiced smile, and stepped down from the podium. The usual round of handshakes followed, but his thoughts were far from the event. The boys. Their mother. The birthmarks. It was all gnawing at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. He glanced down at his watch. It had been over an hour since he'd last seen them. He excused himself from the group of executives and headed back down the hall toward room 209, his heart racing. Just as he approached the door, a code blue alarm blared through the hospital, sharp and insistent. The noise rattled him, but he was used to emergency situations in hospitals. He stepped into the corridor, eyes searching for any signs of what was happening. A nurse hurried past him, her face pale. She barely acknowledged him as she dashed toward the room. His stomach clenched. He moved toward room 209, only to be met by another nurse who was pulling a crash cart down the hall. She didn't notice him at first, but as she passed, she slowed and gave him a brief nod. Her eyes were strained, almost apologetic. "She's in cardiac arrest," the nurse muttered, not stopping to engage, but Alex felt the weight of her words. His breath hitched. They're doing everything they can. Cardiac arrest. His mind spun. Was it Sarah? Was she still alive? The boys had just been in front of their door. Panic gripped him for a moment, but he shoved it down. He had to stay focused. The boys, Lucas, Levi, Liam, he needed to make sure they were okay. They couldn't be alone through this. He turned to head back to them but froze. A doctor came rushing down the hall, his lab coat billowing behind him. The doctor caught sight of Alex and stopped, his face taut with concentration. "You're Mr. Cole, correct? The one who's been visiting the foundation's donation." Alex nodded, his stomach tight. "What's going on in there? Is she?" The doctor hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. "We're doing everything we can. She's still in critical condition. It's going to be a long fight. We need to stabilize her, but we're not sure how long she can hold on." "Who?" Alex asked, his voice low and urgent. "Who's in there with her?" "The boys." The doctor paused again. "The boys are safe. They're in the waiting room for now. We're doing our best to keep them calm. We're running tests to see if they might be a match for any potential procedures, if it comes to that." Alex felt the words hit him hard. He took a step back, his mind processing everything. The mother, Sarah, was fighting for her life, and here were these children, alone, confused. It felt like too much for him to bear. But there was something deeper eating at him now. A memory. He looked down the hallway toward the waiting room. The boys were alone, their faces a mirror image of the confusion and worry he felt in his chest. He moved quickly, his heart hammering. The last thing he wanted was for those children to feel abandoned, especially not now. He arrived at the waiting room, the door ajar. Inside, Lucas, Levi, and Liam were sitting on a long bench, their faces blotchy from crying. They looked small and fragile, the weight of the situation settling heavily on their young shoulders. Alex cleared his throat softly, not wanting to startle them. "Hey," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" Lucas, the oldest of the three, looked up first, wiping his eyes. "Mommy's condition is getting worse," he said, voice trembling. Levi's lip quivered. "They said she's very critical now." Alex knelt down in front of them. He reached out, offering his presence, trying to calm the storm inside of himself. "I know. I heard. But you guys are doing the right thing, staying here for her." Liam stared at him with wide eyes, still gripping his toy car, but he said nothing. Alex could see the pain in his face, the loss they all felt hanging thick in the air. "I'm going to be here for you too," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. "You don't have to be alone, okay?" The boys nodded silently, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was. Alex knew he had to do more. He took a deep breath and stood up, turning back to the hallway. The door to room 209 remained closed, the muffled sound of frantic activity beyond it. Before he could move further, Marcia reappeared, looking frazzled. She motioned to him. "Mr. Cole, we need to talk to the press. They're getting restless." Alex glanced at her, feeling the pressure mount. The cameras, the reporters, the expectations, they were all waiting for him. But the moment in front of him, the boys, the hospital, the woman fighting for her life, it all felt far more urgent. "Not now," he said, his voice firm. "I need more time." Marcia looked taken aback. She hesitated, clearly unsure of how to handle him in this state. But Alex wasn't looking for approval. He had bigger decisions to make, decisions that didn't fit in neatly with his well-planned schedule. He turned back to the boys. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right back. Stay here." He left them with a final glance, heading toward room 209, where Sarah's life hung in the balance. The code blue alarm had subsided, but the tension in the air was palpable. He didn't know what was waiting on the other side of that door. But he did know one thing. The course of his life had just changed. Alex's hand hesitated on the doorknob. His breath caught in his throat as he pushed the door open. The room was dim. The only sound was the soft beep of medical equipment, the sterile smell of antiseptic in the air. And then he saw her. It was as though time had folded back on itself. Her face, though pale and drawn from illness, was still familiar, etched into his memory, locked away in a past he hadn't thought about in years. The woman he had once known, once loved, now lying unconscious in a hospital bed, connected to wires and monitors. He stepped inside, his feet heavy, his heart pounding. For a moment, neither of them moved. They simply stared at each other. Her chest rose and fell with the shallow rhythm of breathing, but Alex could see her eyes flicker beneath closed lids. He froze, unable to look away. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking in confusion at first, then widening as they locked with his. The shock on her face mirrored his own. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Sarah," he breathed, the name leaving his lips before he even realized it. His voice was hoarse, as if his own body couldn't fully process what he was seeing. She blinked again, her lips parted, struggling to speak. "Alex?" Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. It was like no time had passed, yet an entire lifetime had unfolded between them. Neither of them spoke for a few moments, both stunned by the reality of this unexpected meeting. The hospital room felt smaller now, suffocating in its quiet tension. Alex couldn't believe it. After all these years, after everything that had happened, here she was lying in front of him, alive, and somehow still so familiar. "I never thought I'd see you again," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The words hung in the air like a weight neither of them knew how to lift. Alex took a step closer, but he still couldn't bring himself to touch her, unsure of what this moment really meant. She gave him a faint smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "I wasn't sure you'd ever want to," she added softly. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet sounds of the machines. Alex felt the weight of the past pressing down on him, the unanswered questions swirling around his mind. How could this be happening? Why was she here? Why had he never known? Before he could ask, Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The boys," she whispered, her eyes flickering with concern. "They're waiting. I didn't want them to know." Alex looked back toward the door, his chest tightening as he remembered the children. The resemblance, the birthmarks, the overwhelming feeling that they were his. "Don't worry," he said, though his voice was barely a murmur. He wasn't sure who he was reassuring, her or himself. "I'll take care of them." But as he said the words, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence between them thickened, the air heavy with unasked questions. Alex's chest tightened, his throat raw as the words spilled out before he could stop them. "I know this is the wrong time, but I just have to ask," he began, his voice trembling. "What happened to you, Sarah? I looked everywhere for you. I don't understand what's happening." He took a step forward, his hand gripping the side of the bed as if trying to steady himself. "How come your name is Sarah now? What happened to you, Eve?" The words felt foreign, like a name he hadn't said in years. Eve. That was her real name. The woman who had once shared his life, before she vanished without a trace. Sarah, no Eve, looked at him, her eyes brimming with a mixture of guilt and regret. She tried to speak, but the words seemed stuck, trapped somewhere deep inside her. "Alex," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "It's not what you think." He shook his head, desperate for clarity. "I searched for you. For years. I don't understand. Why did you disappear? Why did you leave? Why did you change your name?" His voice cracked as he spoke, the years of unanswered questions finally pouring out. Her gaze dropped, and she struggled to find the right words. "I had no choice, Alex. You don't understand. There was too much at stake. Too much danger." "Danger?" Alex repeated, his brow furrowing. "What kind of danger? You can't just—" He stopped, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The pieces weren't fitting together. He was drowning in questions, but all he needed was one answer. "Are those boys mine?" His voice was louder now, demanding, as though speaking the question aloud would give him the answer he so desperately needed. Eve's eyes flickered toward the door, her expression darkening. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "They're yours." Alex's heart slammed in his chest. The confirmation hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened, disbelief and shock flooding his face. His gaze turned back to the boys he'd met earlier, their faces, their eyes, the birthmarks, the connection he felt. They were his. "You knew all this time?" Alex asked, his voice low, a mix of anger and hurt creeping into his words. "You knew, and you didn't tell me?" Tears welled in Eve's eyes, but she shook her head slowly, the guilt written all over her face. "I wanted to, Alex. I wanted to tell you, but there was never a good time. I thought you'd be better off without me, without the danger following me." He stepped back, trying to process it all. His mind was racing, too many questions, too many years of regret. He had come here to give money, to fulfill a responsibility. Instead, he had found his past, and the family he never knew existed. Eve's breath grew shallow, her body limp beneath the hospital sheets. The machines beeped steadily, but her pulse was fading, weakening with each passing second. Alex watched her, unable to look away. Her face was pale, more fragile than had ever seen it. She was slipping away, right before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She seemed to gather what little strength she had left, her eyes struggling to stay open. A soft, broken smile appeared on her lips, one that Alex had seen years ago when everything was simple, before life had torn them apart. With trembling hands, she reached for him, weakly grasping his wrist. Her voice was faint, barely a whisper. "This must have been fate," she murmured, her eyes meeting his one last time. "Fate brought you here to me. Please, take care of them, give them the life I could not give them." The words hit Alex like a hammer, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. He held her hand, gripping it tighter as the weight of her plea settled in. He wanted to say something, anything, that would make this moment less painful, less final. But the words wouldn't come. He was trapped in the suffocating silence of the room, the distant hum of the machines surrounding him, drowning out everything else. "I will. I swear it," he finally managed to say, his voice breaking. His heart was pounding, but nothing could stop what was happening. Eve's smile faltered, her body growing colder with each passing second. Her hand slackened in his, and she gave one final, shallow breath. Then it was over. The machines went silent, the beeping flatlined. Alex's heart stopped, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. He could feel it in his chest, the moment when her life slipped away, the moment when his world began to crumble around him. He stood there, motionless, staring at her. Her body, once full of life, was now cold and still. The weight of her absence was suffocating. He turned quickly, his voice rising as he called for help. "Help! Someone, please!" His breath came in frantic gasps, his hands shaking as he pressed them to his face. The door swung open, and the doctors rushed in. But Alex didn't need to hear their confirmation. He could already see it. He could feel it in the air. She was gone. The doctors took over, pushing him aside gently as they worked, but Alex couldn't move. His body felt numb, his mind blank. He didn't know what to do, how to react, or how to even begin processing the wave of grief crashing over him. His world had just shattered, and he was left standing there, helpless. Tears welled up in his eyes. And the dam finally broke. Alex Cole, the millionaire who had always prided himself on control, fell to his knees, crying for the woman he lost, and for the children he had just discovered he'd never truly known. Alex stood frozen, his heart still pounding in his chest as he watched Eve's lifeless body. The weight of her death pressed down on him, suffocating him. For a moment, everything around him blurred, her face, her final words, the reality of what had just happened. He had so many questions. Too many. The boys. The danger she had spoken of. Why had she disappeared? And what did she mean by fate? The hospital staff moved around him, but Alex couldn't focus. His mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions. He had to do something. He had to act, but what? As the doctors made their final assessment, Alex stumbled back from the bed, still in shock. He didn't know how much time had passed before he walked out of the room, but when he reached the waiting room, his world seemed to collapse all over again. The boys were waiting. Lucas, Levi, and Liam looked up at him, their eyes filled with silent confusion and pain. The silence between them was thick, unbearable. Alex forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, guys," he said, his voice shaky but firm. "We're going home." He led them out of the hospital, his mind still reeling. He couldn't explain what had just happened. He didn't understand any of it, but one thing was certain. Those boys were his now. His responsibility. At home, Alex didn't waste time. He arranged a DNA test, one that would confirm what he already knew in his heart. Days later, the results came back, and the court recognized him as their father. It was a process he hadn't expected to face, but it was done. Lucas, Levi, Liam, his sons. But there was something else. Something Eve had warned him about. The danger. Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to Sarah's sudden disappearance than she had let on. What had she been running from? What life had she lived in the 5 years since he lost track of her? And why hadn't she told him? Determined to find answers, Alex threw himself into the investigation. He used his resources, hired private investigators, and followed every lead he could find. But every attempt to uncover Sarah's past led to dead ends. There were no records, no witnesses, nothing that could explain her life in those missing years. Frustration built inside him, but he refused to give up. But for now, he had to focus on the present. The boys needed him. And Alex made a promise to himself that day. He would be the best father he could be for them. As he watched them play in the living room, their innocent laughter filling the space, Alex felt something shift within him. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He wasn't just the millionaire that people saw in the media. He was their father now, and nothing else mattered. The weight of the responsibility settled on his shoulders, but this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held. He didn't know what danger Sarah had been talking about, but for now he knew one thing. His life had changed forever, and he would do whatever it took to give his sons the life that Sarah had asked him to. A year had passed since Alex had taken the boys into his care. The weeks rolled by, and the change in their lives was undeniable. Lucas, Levi, and Liam were thriving. The quiet boys who had once clung to their broken past were now excelling in school, their laughter filling their new home as they adapted to a life of opportunity. Their grades were improving, their futures brighter. Alex had made sure they went to the best schools, and they lived better than they ever had before. Alex had dedicated himself fully to fatherhood, and in many ways, he had found peace in his new role. The pain of losing Eve, the woman he had once loved, still lingered, but it was manageable. It was the boys who kept him going, who reminded him every day of the second chance he had been given. But one ordinary afternoon, everything shifted again. Alex was returning from a meeting, his mind still on the day's discussions when he walked into the house. A stack of mail sat on the kitchen counter, bills and catalogs scattered around. He almost missed it. One letter, sealed and stamped, marked with an unfamiliar return address. He opened it slowly, his fingers trembling as he pulled the letter free. It read, "When the boys are of age, I will come back for what truly belongs to me." Alex's heart stopped. The words stared back at him, chilling him to the core. Who is this? And what did they mean by what truly belongs to me? The peace he had built with the boys. The life they were starting to enjoy, all of it was now hanging by a thread. The end. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story when it drops.